If you've ever asked the universe for some kind of sign and got it clear as day, what was it and how did it go? All my life, whenever I went to the beach I had wanted to find an intact sand dollar. I had found lots of pieces, but never a whole one. When I was in my mid-30s, I went with a group of friends to the coast. I was walking alone along the beach in the moonlight close to midnight. I was feeling very sorry for myself in the dark. And really lonely. Even though I was with my friends that weekend. I had just started thinking the thought. Wouldn't it be a great sign right now to know that I'm loved if I finally found a sand dollar? I had barely formed the thought when I looked down. And right at my feet was an intact sand dollar. My, then, girlfriend was having a really awful week. I felt terrible for her. Which made me realize how serious our relationship was because empathy is not a strong suit of mine. She wanted to take a trip to the Grand Tetons to clear her head. She wanted to see a moose on this trip. But it was August, so relatively unlikely since they tend to move to higher elevations that time of year. I had never seen a moose in the wild. Before we left, I thought if we see a moose on this whirlwind 72 hours road trip I will take it as a sign I should marry this girl. Double quote. Sure enough. Right in the middle of the day, on one of the busiest trails in the park, is a great big bull moose hanging out in the lake. Married 5 years this year. I decided to kill myself about the age of 13. Life sucked. And I planned to go home from church that night and off myself if there was no direct intervention. Out of nowhere my aunt stopped me and said, I feel like you need to come home with me. And I'm still here. Damn bitch. I really don't like my job. And I've been daydreaming about what I could do. I just needed a place to be able to do it. The next day I get offered to house sit for a couple years in this big Japanese house that has a storefront in the front. There's a perfect space to do what I would want to do. I would live rent free and be able to save up to buy my own business visa here. I wouldn't need to work in this job anymore. Greater than sign. Had to choose between MCDS and Taco Bell. I flipped a coin and chose MCDS. Friend got TB and had food poisoning. I was in the depths of despair. I had lost my great job. Had to travel 2 hours every day with heavy tools each way to a temporary job I was doing. Sitting on the bus. Thinking my world was over and it all kind of got to me all at once and I began to tear up. Not wanting to bawl my eyes out in public I held it in. So I asked for something, anything that could show me that life wasn't worthless. A lady I didn't see must have how bad I was, or maybe it was just coincidence, but just after I cried out in my head, I heard the words, everything is going to be okay. It saved my life. Edit. I had no idea that this would affect you all so much. Sometimes it might be dark and a small spark starts a fire. Sometimes you're the small spark. Be the change you want to see in the world. Thank you for the awards too. I can now give awards to others. Lottery tickets. I was always curious about lottery tickets but never wanted to indulge in it. One day in a grocery store, I told the universe, I am going to buy a lotto ticket now, not the grand bumper ones. Just a simple scratch one, for the first time in life. If I win a prize, I'll take it as a sign from you and never buy it again. Double quote. I bought a ticket for $3. Scratched it and won $500. I smiled and donated $250 of the amount. Enjoyed some good food multiple times with the other $250. Never bought or looked at a lottery ticket again. Will never do. This wasn't really asking for a sign. But I was going through a lot and in a really shitty and dark place. Like the kind of place I honestly wasn't sure I'd survive. I was teetering on the edge of despair and genuinely going down the path towards doing something insanely drastic. I basically just asked the universe for help one day while in the middle of another crying episode, and I had this strange, sunny feeling kind of leak into the darkness I was harboring inside of me. The next day, by chance, I met my group of friends on a video game I played regularly at the time. They lived in an entirely different city and had entirely different lives from me, but we all just clicked. It took a month or two for me to settle into that friendship and understand that they were gonna stick around. And they've been my best friends for 3 years now. Some of my best memories are from that first summer that I knew them. I genuinely don't think I would have survived that time in my life had I not met them. I was feeling incredibly alone and I was trying to come to terms with a lot of things all at once. I'm infinitely grateful for them. And I can't help but think that the universe was listening that day when, as a last-ditch effort, I asked it for help. I was in a bad time of my life. I grew up quite naive and I'd like to say sheltered. So when my first boyfriend broke up with me, it was the worst thing that ever happened to me. He was my first and I took it very seriously, so it made it 1000x worse for me. I already had depression, but this knocked me onto suicidal territory. I wasn't sleeping. Lost 20 pounds BC. I wouldn't eat. I felt sickly, weak, and just didn't want to be here anymore. I felt like no one cared. I just wanted someone to hold me and tell me that it'll be okay. I like to drive and blast my music when I'm upset to unwind, so I started to drive on the highway and I decided I was finally going to end it. A few minutes before I was going to gear my car off the highway into the lining of trees, I looked in my rearview mirror and saw an ambulance driving behind me. I had never seen an ambulance on the highway that didn't have its signal going and immediately broke down and cried. The ambulance was just cruising behind me. I took that as a sign that the universe did care and that I was significant. So I drove home to my mother and told her I needed help. I was taken to the hospital, put on medication and went to therapy for my underlying issues and depression. A year and a half later I am off medication, no longer needing therapy, and currently thriving. That ambulance truly saved me that day. I got home from my best friend's funeral. The whole time sitting in the funeral home asking him or God for a sign. When I got home I turned on the TV, and his favorite song was playing on Much Music. I'm currently worried about my best friend. Honestly, being my only friend that could just kick open the door, say what's up fuckers type stuff. It's annoying to see him going down this path of drinking because of some personal stuff in his life. But I hope you're doing well, also not a friggin' idiot. I'm not superstitious at all, but my uncle is. When my nan passed he went to see a fortune teller who told him that anytime our family sees white feathers around, that's nan's way of showing us that she's there. I thought it was a load of bullshit and forgot about it. A few years later I was at a music festival. Everything was coated in dirt and dust being churned up by thousands of people's feet. Even the air was so thick with dust it was making it hard to see and breathe. I was on the edges of the mosh pit when I started to have my first panic attack. I'd never had one before. Didn't know what was happening to me and I was terrified. I felt like I was being crushed and like I was the only person in the world at the same time. I remember desperately thinking I don't want to be alone. I don't want to be here alone. I crouched down in the middle of the dirty dusty crown and when I opened my eyes there was a single white feather on the ground right between my feet. It was perfectly white. No dirt. Not stepped on or anything in a mosh pit. I stared at the feather until I could get my breathing under control and get out of there, and I still have that feather. Edit. Thank you for the award, kind stranger. For anyone asking, the festival was southbound in Western Australia. Sadly it's no longer running. I was walking. What would have been a 4-hour drive. And I was walking. I straight up begged for a car to stop and pick me up, and literally seconds later a woman stopped who was traveling all the way to where I was heading. Same town. 4 hours away. What are those odds? Similar thing happened to me. A guy picked me up when I was hitchhiking and was going to drop me off at the train station so I could catch a coach to my hometown 4 hours away. As we were chatting we realized we were heading to the same town. He was a delivery driver doing drop-offs along the way. He offered for me to stay with him in the car. I helped him map out his deliveries and he bought me a pub feed and dropped me off outside my parents' place and came in for a cuppa and met them. I had gotten a job at a retail store and went in for the orientation and to do training. The vibe was kind of off in the store but I ignored it. I got to the back where the computers were but couldn't shake the feeling of being uncomfortable. In my head I said, Alright universe. If I'm not meant to work here, show me some kind of sign. Make them send me home for the day or something. About an hour later, a huge storm rolled in and shut off the power in the store. The manager came in and said for me to go home since their computers weren't working and I couldn't do my training. A couple months later and I was working at a new job that I absolutely love. Sounds really stupid, but I was visiting my nanny and she had just spontaneously told me her sexual abuse story. I was shocked and hadn't ever told anyone mine. So on the drive home I jokingly told myself if there's Y in the next number plate I see on the way home I'll tell my boyfriend my story. Probably 9/10 cars had a Y on them. I think it was just a coincidence, but at least I got to tell my story and I don't regret it. My son passed away and I sat at the kitchen table in shock. I couldn't really believe he was gone. I asked him to send me a sign so I'd know he was still with us. In spirit if not in body. A few minutes later all the lights in the house went out. I didn't believe it was him, so I even checked the fuse box. I almost called an electrician, but for some reason I couldn't bring myself to do it. It was just the lights. The power points still worked so I could cook and the fridge was on. It stayed that way for 2 days until I eventually said okay I know it's you, and they came back on. I was so overwhelmed with grief at the time this seemed like nothing, but now I see how crazy it was. I get this might be hard for some people to believe, but I really don't care if anyone believes it or not. I just needed to know he was somewhere else besides in the ground because he was only in his 20s and it just wasn't fair he was gone so young. You should never outlive your children. I asked if I should bother sending a text to my abusive ex. My phone responded by discharging all of its electricity through the charger port and refusing to turn back on. Edit. I feel as though I should clarify this since there's been a bit of confusion. I'm a dude. The abuser was my ex-girlfriend. So, yeah. Sadly that shit happens to guys too. But I was lucky to have supportive friends and family that helped me to get the hell away from her. And now I know what signs to look for and what lines don't get crossed. Actually just got out of the healthiest relationship of my life. And though I'm quite sad about it ending, at least I know now how to find a good person to be vulnerable with. Wife was insisting I work the garden on my day off. I begrudgingly started but said to her if it rains I'm out. Right on cue there was a huge clap of thunder and lightning strike up on the hill about 2 miles away. I did the little robot shutdown dance and Dad moonwalked back into the house. My mother passed away when I was a baby, so I have no memories of her, and my dad rarely talks about her as it was very painful for him. I had a very abusive childhood and don't really speak to my family much, so I'm very much an independent loner. In a moment of weakness seeking support, I asked the universe and my mother for guidance and that if she really is there watching over me to wake me up at exactly 3:33 AM that night. She proved she was there for me that night. Woke up randomly at exactly 3:33 AM. I found more strength that night and I continue to seek ways of connecting with her. Once while walking to work as a teenager I asked God to show me a sign if I should get out of my relationship, abusive ex, and just as I finished the prayer a fish came flying out of nowhere and smacked me in the face. I went down and blacked out for a second, and when I came to there were these 3 hillbilly men surrounding me, fanning me, and just generally freaking out. When they realized I was awake they just started apologizing and said they swore they had put the strap on their cooler. They gave me some ice for my eye and walked me down to work so I could call my mom to pick me up. I broke up with my ex the next day out of fear of being smacked by a roguefish again. I just spoke to the universe and said some things. Got on Reddit to distract me from a troubled mind. And I find a question like this right on top. How's that for some cherry pie? Same. I'm sitting outside with tears in my eyes asking for some guidance and come across this. Not a coincidence, I would say. Walking to my car to go smoke weed with some friends and I asked the universe if this should be the last time I smoke. Turned on the car. Radio goes on. F King Tom Petty last dance with Mary Jane. Double quote. What are the chances, right? Wasn't my last dance. I'd been unhappy in my line of work for some time. I had been reading some self-help books, I am not religious, called Conversations with God by Neil Donald Walsh. It talked about the universe reflecting your thoughts, words and actions directly back at you. i.e., wanting a career change results in a reality of wanting a career change. There was a message about being and not doing. So I wanted to test this with an experiment, as it all sounded a bit mumbo jumbo. So I volunteered in a special needs youth club, so I could be and give what I wanted the universe to reflect back at me. This led to a job as a support worker for special needs in a college, which led to completing a distance learning degree, which led to teacher training, which led to being a graduate lecturer, which led to deputy management of a whole faculty and ultimately a career helping 100s of people each year. I have continued to practice this creating your own reality philosophy of being through thoughts, speech and actions. The number of times it works cannot be just luck. Believing in luck is just as far-fetched if you really think about it. Capital X. Coming out for the very first time, I was really, unnecessarily, nervous. It was to a good friend of mine and I saw him walking around with rainbow socks. Then I knew I would be fine. So after 5 minutes of awkward stumbling I said that I'm B and he just replied with a smooth "Oh me too lol." When I was a teenager I had bad problems with depression and anxiety that led to very self-destructive behavior. There were many times I imagined killing myself and one night I was set on doing it. Came home drunk and sad and started cutting myself, which was one of my methods for dealing with my emotions. I sat in my bed crying, trying to find the courage to cut deeper and end it. Then my dog Snoopy hopped up on the bed and put his head on my lap. Thanks to him doing that I realized that I just couldn't do that to him or to my parents and friends. He saved my life that night. The next day I decided to open up to my parents and ask them to help me find some help, which was a huge step forward. Starting seeing a therapist and she really helped me work through a lot of things. Still struggle a bit sometimes, but I'm able to manage thanks to the help I received and I credit that little lovable mutt for me being around today. During one of the lowest points of my life, I often drove around for hours listening to music, not telling anyone where I was or where I was going. On one of these drives, I was trying to motivate myself into finally seeking some help or at least talking to people I knew about how deeply depressed I was. And to stop naively driving around without telling anyone where I was going because it was reckless. I was thinking something like, I don't know what to do anymore. God, please give me a sign or something. When the song Snap Out of It by the Arctic Monkeys came on, I remember because I was annoyed that it played twice even though I had a playlist on shuffle. I was driving through a side road in the woods at this time, and the road was getting really narrow and muddy. On a tight and very muddy turn, I lost control of my car and was sliding off the road straight towards a huge tree. Fortunately, my car stopped sliding just in time. I stared around, and after realizing how close I came to a possibly fatal accident, I broke down crying. I stopped disappearing on everyone after that because I realized there were people who truly cared about me and wanted to help. Years ago I had lost my job. I was doing a lot of temp and part-time gigs, but there would be dry spells where I couldn't find anything. I like to go on long walks, just around the city or down by the lake, maybe through a park. Just be by myself thinking about life and what to do next. I'd talk with myself, have conversations with the universe. I'd ask, do I really have a shot at pulling my life together? Everything is so messed up. Will I find some meaning? Some direction? Or am I cursed to just wander lost till I'm eventually hit by a car or struck by lightning or caught in a fire? If that's my fate, why not get it over with? Either that or give me some hope to believe in. Well, a few weeks later I got my answer. I was hit by a car. When I was in the army back in 2002, I was fresh out of BMQ and I found out my ex, like every other 18-year-old boots ex, was cheating on me. I got home and I got custody of our kid. Why I joined the army, and I asked the universe right then for a sign. I was like, give me a sign if I should forgive her or if I should move on, and lo and behold, prayers answered. While driving along the highway, I looked out the window and there is a sign of a First Nations park that is done in a First Nations style art, and it's in the shape of a sun. Almost the exact tattoo she had told me she wanted many times. I took this as an attempt at the universe teaching me to be compassionate and understanding. This woman reconciled with me. We fell in love again. F-kid like you wouldn't believe, and every day I have to tell the universe that it can go FCK itself. I regret listening to it almost. She immediately drained my bank account and wrecked my car and gave me crabs. Never stopped cheating. I took this as proof that the universe hates me and was like, haha FCKU. We've been at odds since. I was 15 when I moved out of my mom's house. I was making a real effort to reconnect with friends after depression, suicidal tendencies had driven me away from them, and was making real strides after leaving my abusive home. Talking to people, being near people at all, was a real struggle. One morning just before class started, a friend of mine walked past, and even though I was usually super paranoid about being late to class, I stopped him and talked to him for a bit. Turns out he had just that morning broken up with his girlfriend, who none of us knew was very cruel and manipulative. He had been with her for years and it took a lot for him to do that. I gave him a hug, which was crazy cause I usually hated being touched, and told him he would find the right person, that he deserved better. Well, somehow, it turns out he thinks I'm the right person. We've been together almost 10 years now and I can't imagine being without him. Not sure I believe in signs or whatever, but that day I did something way out of character and it's paid off ever since.